Let's Read Clips, which features daily 8 to 10 minute scary story videos with one story per video, getting you right into the action. You can find the links down in the description or pinned comment. And thank you all again so much. I was a long-haul trucker for almost 10 years, and I've got my fair share of wild stories from those times too. They're not all bad, but I guess it's just harder to remember the good ones sometimes, and top of that, no one asks for the funny stories. They only ever want to know the crazy or creepy ones. And out of all the things that happened to me while out on the road, this one haunts me more than most. One of my main trucking routes was from Denver, Colorado to San Antonio, but with one stop in El Paso along the way. As anyone will tell you, driving through El Paso takes you under and over a hell of a lot of bridges. There's a strip where the 10 and the 110 cross that looks like spaghetti when you look at it on a map, and I was once driving in that area in the early hours of the morning, having just gotten back on the road to San Antonio. I was dead tired, wired on cheap energy drinks, and was just reminding myself of why I hated driving at night so much. When wham, something smashes into the windshield of my truck. On pure instinct, I slam my foot on the brakes, wrestling the wheel to make sure that I don't jackknife and tip over on the highway, and thankfully, I soon came to a complete stop. But there was still the issue of what exactly had hit me. So the second that I was sure that I didn't have any injuries, I jumped out of my cab and started looking around. Lying on the highway, a few yards back to my right, was a body. And since they came out of absolutely nowhere, there was one place that they could have come from: above me. My first thought was that it was some kind of attempt to take their own life or something like that, like a double whammy of the fall then getting crushed under the wheel of my truck. They didn't go under the wheels though. They just smashed in my cab and tumbled off to the side, and as terrible as their injuries were, I knew that there was a chance that they might still be alive. I rushed over to where they were laying, trying to juggle dialing 911 with trying to get a response from them. They were in some pretty bad shape, but I could tell that it was a Hispanic guy in his 20s or 30s maybe. But then as I went about checking their vitals while talking to the dispatch, I realized this guy was dead. And not recently dead either. The dude was legitimately cold. I was passing that on to dispatch when I noticed all the saran wrap all over his side. He was lying on his side, so it wasn't obvious at first, but sure enough, someone had wrapped his torso in saran wrap in order to secure a large piece of paper to his chest. I didn't want to touch the guy. My Spanish isn't great, and I couldn't get a good look at what was written on the paper anyways, but I know enough Spanish to know that ja 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 is how Mexicans say ha ha ha, like laughter. And what little of the paper I could see was covered in those ja 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 ja's. The guy hadn't jumped off the bridge. It's pretty clear that someone had thrown him off, and whoever did it thought it was funny. I since learned that El Paso, along with almost every other border town, has a lot of trouble with cartel violence, but El Paso especially so. I was questioned by cops at the scene, and I had to get a guy out to change my windshield, so my overall journey was delayed by about 18 hours, but the eventual drive into San Antonio felt like an eternity. As you can probably guess, truckers have a lot of time alone with their thoughts. Sometimes that can be a good time, other times not so much. And that final leg of the journey over to San Antonio definitely fell into the not so much category. Like I said, I've seen some crazy things in my time as a trucker, but in terms of pure horror stories, that one just about covers it. I think it would have been a whole lot worse if the person had still been alive when I hit him, because even though I wasn't the one to toss him off the bridge, there'd still be that thought of, if I'd only picked a different route, or variations of that kind of train of thought, I guess. But still, seeing the laughter on that chest sign is something that kept creeping back in my mind on dark and lonely stretches of that highway. Every death is a tragedy in some form, As a God-fearing man, I believe that with all my heart. But then to think that there's folks out there who see death as the punchline to some sick joke, well, that's a thought that just about chills me to the bone. So I had the unfortunate ability to recall something really scary my older sister and I saw on a walk home during elementary school. She confirmed that what I remembered was true, and the more I think about it, the more it scares my 36-year-old brain. My sister Bianca and I are 4 years apart, and I had the blessing of being able to have the most attentive and protective big sister, and she always has this remarkable sixth sense. To the point that I have swore over the years that my gullible naivety I had at that age never could grasp that this type of situation was extremely dangerous, until now. I'm 7 years old, first or second grade. My sister is in the 5th grade, age 11. We lived in a small town in the South Bay area of California, 45 minutes south of San Jose. This was an extremely hot day, but we walked the usual 8 blocks from our elementary school to our home. Just some info regarding my mom. She worked nights stocking at our local Safeway most of my adolescent life, so we were very independent. Got up and ready for school on our own, etc. Mom slept until 3:30 p.m. and then up, clean, wash, and made dinner and then worked by 9 p.m. I mentioned this more for background of the type of childhood I had. It was a different time during the mid-90s. Every day we stayed after school for an hour with our favorite kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Marfia. My siblings and I all had the blessing of having the same kindergarten teacher that we developed a super close relationship with her and enjoyed helping her clean up and prepare for her morning class every day. Mrs. Marfia usually would drive us home, but couldn't that afternoon due to staying later than usual to wait for her husband James to pick her up and take her to the mechanic to pick up her car. So this meant that my sister and I were going to be the only kids walking home at this time. We didn't care because of all the attention this wonderful teacher gave us. I'll post some of the wonderful things she did for my sister and I growing up in another category. She was a gem. In the 90s, the area behind my house was an undeveloped lot, a good 3 blocks long by 1.5 blocks wide directly in front of the newly placed skate park, so from my backyard gate we could see the park. Upon passing the park, we would race or run from the sidewalk that borders the park to the back door of our fence, which was my favorite because my sister always let me feel like I was the winner. But halfway through the run, I'm ahead as I mentioned before, and I'm passing through the normal sticker bushes. Everything is dirt and ugly tall weeds that would poke you badly if you got too close. Some of the bushes you could hide under, but it was so ugly we usually raced to avoid the stickers. But I'm literally 100 yards from the fence, and I hear my sister scream my name. Like not a normal scream, but she shouts my first name and middle name really sharply, and I stop dead in my tracks. I yell back at her, "What?" Right before I can turn around and fully see what's going on, she just pummels into me. She's grabbing my shoulders while wrapping her arm to shield my face from what I'm sure I'll be scared of. And this is all the while shoving me forward, and I'm just so confused in this moment. There was no way to say anything, but from the break between her fingers, I see 2 sets of legs under a large bush, and this is where my memory plays like I'm watching a movie and I can rewind every detail. I have spent many hours with my sister recalling details that I blocked but scared myself that I could vividly recall. So, I witness an assault. They are laying down under a large bush with both sets of legs exposed. I see a man dressed in a red tank top with blue dirty jeans and black boots. He has sunglasses on. He was very agitated looking because he was choking a young woman. She was probably barely 20, wearing overalls, a white t-shirt, and white sandals. Her face was very dirty, bruised, and lips blue, scratching at his hands, moaning, trying to get air out. And this is all I get to see. Obviously more than enough before my sister yanks me to an alternate way. She said that she was afraid that he'd follow us or see us unlock our gate to the house, so she took me around the long way. I'm terrified. sobbing, asking her, "Sissy, what was that? That guy was killing her." And my sister responds, "No, Mama, let's go. Hurry. We can tell Mom. Just hurry up." All I see after is a blur until we get home and wake my mom up, hysterically telling her what we saw. She called the police, but we never got any information regarding if they found her. I've scoured the internet for anything about an assault or kidnapping, anything that I'd never seen or heard. My sister cried when I asked her recently about this memory, thinking it was something I had a nightmare about. But the detail I recalled made her scared that it severely traumatized me. But who knows? It's scary in any context. About 3 years ago, I, a 21-year-old female, was a waitress during the height of COVID. It was my first ever job, and I remember being so excited to start as soon as possible. After all my training was finished and I got my certifications, I was put on the closing shift. We closed at 10 p.m. every night at that time, and typically it was just my cook, a 20-year-old male, and I. Rarely would there be another waitress with me, and I liked it that way. I always worked better alone, and I didn't really get along with most of the other waitresses anyway, so it was nice. I can remember it was near the end of my time there that this experience happened, and I'm really happy I had the circumstance I did at that time. I never could really trust my gut very much because I had mild anxiety and couldn't tell if what I felt half the time was valid or not. I mention this because when all things went down, it felt real and I had an absolute feeling. I had started my shift that evening at around 3 p.m. I said goodbye to the last waitress and I was on my own with my cook. Everything was pretty slow and normal until I got a call about one of the specialty items on the limited time menu that we had. The food couldn't be ordered as takeout, and the lady over the phone really didn't take it well. After a little debating, she finally decided to just sit in and eat instead. I'd say at around 10 to 20 minutes later is when I spotted an older-looking car pull up and 3 people came out. 2 men and a woman who looked to be in their 30s to 40s. I could tell it was the same lady I spoke to over the phone, judging by her attitude coming in. I further confirmed it by asking since I already had a pretty good idea of what she wanted to eat. What I thought was an act of mild embarrassment and pettiness was actually something much more sinister later on. Her attitude toward me changed when she saw me. She was much nicer and more cooperative. This didn't ring any bells at first because it was something that most people who wanted to look good in front of others would do. I sat them in a booth and took their orders. I noticed they had a red binder and a black pen. Remember this. I then went to attend to my other customers as there were a couple of other tables I was waiting on. Once I brought their food out to them, they asked me if I knew any realtors. I found this to be normal, as this being a tourist vacation state, it wasn't uncommon for outsiders to be looking for getaway homes. I would say this was reasonable for me to assume that it was nothing if they didn't already look like the unsavory type of people, if you get what I mean. Nonetheless, I gave them the phone number to a realtor that I knew closely and well since I often went to church with her. There wasn't any other notable interactions I really had aside from occasional small talk if I wasn't doing anything or refilling their drinks. It was around 4:30 p.m. now, and they were the last of my tables to leave the restaurant. If any of you are in the food industry, you know that as a server, you don't really get breaks. Just lunch most of the time, and sometimes not even that if it's super busy all day. So my cook and I took this as an opportunity to take a well-deserved break. We walked out behind them and had a small chat with them. I should mention by now that the front of the restaurant had a disabled ramp coming up to the doors. It was long because the building was on a raised foundation, and this is important. Now, I didn't really notice it at the time, but one of the men took my cook to the other side of the ramp, down near the end, and was chatting with him over a cigarette. I was behind the railing at the top of the platform where the ramp plateaued. Luckily, the other man and the woman were on the other side of the railing about 5 feet below, but in front of me. We were having some small talk, and they started to ask some personal questions, such as if I lived in the area, if I smoked weed, how old I was, etc. I hadn't quite learned yet that telling strangers such personal things was not a good idea. However, this for some reason was starting to raise some red flags. I gave very vague answers to all her questions as best I could. Unfortunately, they still persisted in trying to have some sort of communication with me outside of my work, whether or not I said no. I suppose when they finally realized that I wasn't going to give that information up, the woman finally got to her point. She had told me that she had a business offer for me. It was for a cleaning service. I don't like cleaning anyway, so regardless, I would have said no. However, what she said next solidified my answer. She proceeded to tell me that she owned a maid service called the Pretty Kitties Maid Service. She said that she needed pretty and young girls like me, that she had 10 girls now as it was and she wanted to expand. She mentioned how they get paid $30K. She didn't specify the time or length, and how it would be a great opportunity for me to help her with her business. I instantly knew at that point that it certainly wasn't a maid business and that I probably was in danger. However, I didn't understand just how much danger I truly was in. I politely declined her offer and told her I liked my job as it was, that I was satisfied working for my boss. She tried to further convince me by telling me how easy it was and reiterating how much I'd make under her supervision. She mentioned how she had a van for her business and described it to me. I can't exactly remember what she told me, but I do remember how she told me to follow her to her car. She said that she'd show me a picture of her van in her car, but her phone was in her hands. I knew for certain that I wasn't going anywhere with her near that car. I declined yet again and said that I was fine right here where I was. I said that she could show me on her phone instead, but she was hesitant. After which she proceeded to end the conversation and left with the two men. A little shaken, I walked back into the restaurant with my cook and told him what I'd just experienced. He joked about how I'd have good money if I went with them. Because I didn't take the situation as seriously as I should have, I just sort of laughed it off with him. At the end of the night, when the cook's grandmother came to pick us up, I mentioned this weird interaction. A panicked look came over her and she sat silent, staring at me. I got confused and asked her if everything was okay, and that's when I learned the signs of human trafficking. She broke to me that I was almost trafficked, and I was incredibly lucky I didn't get kidnapped. My stomach dropped and I started to panic at the realization of just how much danger I was in. Nothing really happened after that except for the red binder and the black pen I told you to remember. I went to work the next day and a customer walked in. Now normally in my part of town, not many people like to sit and relax for a while. They're mostly there just to eat and leave, as it wasn't exactly a cafe. While I get into my apron and sit this gentleman, he was well dressed, not in a suit and tie, but just nicely dressed, and he was alone. I sat him at a single booth and took his order of one single coffee. He had a red binder and a black pen with him. I didn't even notice until my cook from the night before reminded me of it. I was so shocked at the fact, and it unsettled me even more, that he proceeded to sit there for 3 hours, watching me as I tended my tables. I kept asking him if he needed anything else, and he asked me if people never just sat and relaxed with coffee. I sort of shrugged and said no, not here. Now this might come as a surprise to some of you, but servers, believe it or not, do listen in on some of your conversations. I'm lucky I did with this one. I specifically remember him speaking over the phone about finances and how he needed to find another house. He spoke about moving money and how he was going to pay his girls that night. I ran to the back of the kitchen and told my cook. Thankfully, he came out with me to help deliver some plates in order to throw the guy off. It worked, I think. He ended up leaving not long after that, and I haven't seen or heard anything since. I'll tell you though, I've been much more on guard since that day. I am a person with pretty long hair, but not female nor trans. There is a girl in my university class last year that has the same hair color as me, black, long hair. She's quite popular and usually gets asked out a lot. Sometimes people confuse me with her due to us both having black hair, similar height, and similar hair length. She would sometimes tease me about having to worry about such long hair, but that's off topic. Now, one night in February, I finished my work and packed up since that was the term break. It was getting a little dark out, but I figured that a single kilometer walk to a friend's house wouldn't be dangerous. I used to play a bunch of sports in high school, so I feel like the close proximity to the campus, as well as my personal strength, were able to defend myself for just an hour. Canada, where I live, is quite safe, as many of you might know, so I walked on. It was around 10:30 when I started walking. Tons of students already left the campus beforehand, so there wasn't a lot of people traveling with me. Those who were probably just decided to spend another night in the dorms, and my hometown is in British Columbia, and my university was far away, so I needed to board a plane to go back. Around 800 meters of walking later, I felt the presence of someone walking behind me. Suddenly, he put his arm around my neck and started choking me. It took me a good second to realize what was going on, and the person was choking me so hard that I can feel my jugular vein expanding at the bottom due to lack of space for blood to go through. I kick him right in the back of the knee, or the bottom of the thigh, I forget, and that made his knee bend forward. He started falling to the ground. I back kicked him in the balls, which is when he let go a little, and then I got out of his arms and started punching his face. In my adrenaline-filled moment, I thought he was going to attack me again, so I punched him a few times to make sure he wouldn't get up, ran away, and then I called the police. Thankfully, I was okay. The guy who had beaten me was apparently some stalker, confusing me for the girl that I mentioned above. He was arrested, however, I don't really know what happened to him, although he did get charged with assault and stalking, however my memory is a little faded from that night. I hope this story can inspire others to not panic in a situation like this, but to get out of it ASAP. I, a 52-year-old female at the time, was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I had stopped at a popular, busy gas station/travel shop. Okay, it's Buc-ee's, to fill up the car, stretch my legs, use the restroom, and grab a snack. I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was looking for a ride to a town a couple of towns over. Her ride had abandoned her while she was in the restroom. She was a little upset. She didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone numbers, so I could call someone for her. I checked with the employees at the store, and they said that she had been there for an hour looking for a ride because she said her friends left her while she was in the restroom. I then made the decision to do something I'd never done before: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town that she wanted to go to, but I was heading in that direction, and I told her that I could drop her off at the grocery store in the next town where I would be turning off to go to my destination. The grocery store was always busy, and it was very likely she'd have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted to go also. And she'd be 5 miles away from where she wanted to go instead of 25 miles, and she'd have an easier time walking the distance if she had to. This was agreeable to her, so we set off. Right away, I noticed a van following us. I tried to lose the van, but it seemed to keep pace. Meanwhile, the woman wanted to play with my phone. I told her no, it wasn't a toy, it was for work, and I moved it out of her reach. The van speeds up and starts to get closer. The woman suddenly remembers her boyfriend's phone number, and we need to call him. I can't use my phone while driving. This was pre-car sync voice-activated operation, and I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of the next town, and no cell phone use while driving signs were everywhere. I told her, "We're almost to the grocery store, we can call him from the parking lot, okay?" And she becomes agitated and yells, "No, you have to take me home." I told you I can't do that, I'm not going there. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We'll call him from the parking lot, alright? She becomes more upset and frustrated, and I notice that the van is getting closer. I pull into the grocery store parking lot. It's about 4 p.m., and the grocery store is busy. I pull up in front of the store and ask for her boyfriend's number, and she can't remember his number. She won't get out of the car. She's arguing with me, and the van is pulling into the parking lot now. There is a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, and I roll down my window and signal that I need to speak to him. He walks over and asks me what's going on. I tell him where I met this woman, and now she won't get out of the car, and under my breath I tell him that there was a van that's been following us. The deputy tells the woman, "She brought you here where you asked her to. I think it's time for you to leave her car right now." She slowly gets out of the car, and I ask once more for her boyfriend's number, and she says, "You're crazy. I don't have a boyfriend. Oh, look, they're my friends now." And she points at that van. The deputy and I share a look, and he says, "Give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. You get out of here and I'll check on you before my shift is over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers." I left and went to my destination. He called me to make sure that I got to where I was going and told me that they were keeping an eye on the van and its owners. He told me he also contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working and that she would contact me in a day or two. While I was on an assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the woman in the van. No one ever told me anything about them, but they were very interested in the whole process. My nightmare is one day I'll turn on a true crime show and see a report about this woman and her gang robbing and killing people. This all started a couple of days ago, July 5th, where I'd get a random call from FedEx at around 10 p.m. where they would ask me for my name and address, which they already knew. I gave it to them thinking that it might be a package that was lost and somehow found its way back to my home. In hindsight, I should have known FedEx doesn't deliver past 8 p.m. here in Canada. I thought nothing of it till I got another phone call saying they can't find my unit number and asked me to come out to the roundabout near my place. My dad thought it was weird, so he patrolled the area to find these people. My dad did around 4 laps. The first lap there wasn't anything there, but then I got curious and joined him for the second lap, and yet again, nothing. I went back to my home and my dad did a 3rd lap around the house. He found a gray SUV in the corner, confronted them. They told my dad they aren't the delivery person, and my dad left to do another confirmation check. As he was doing this last lap, that same SUV wasn't there. The next day, July 6th, at around 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., we hear a doorbell ringing, and I went down to check, and it was 2 individuals around the ages of maybe 20. They knew my name and were calling out for me. I thought it was weird because I had never seen these people before. I didn't feel safe, so I didn't pursue them. They kept coming over and over again, so we called the police and talked about what we should do. The cops told me to contact them if it happens again. And so, the next day, July 7th, it was very quiet and nothing weird happened, so we thought the worst had ended and just went on with my day. And then the day after that, July 8th, it was that same quietness, but when the time approached 11 p.m., my security camera spotted an individual with a mask on taking a photo or video of my current house. And this was the breaking point. We contacted the police and informed them about this weird behavior. But just when we thought it was over, I was casually in the living room at around 3 a.m. the same day, July 8th, and I heard something sort of thunking outside on my balcony. I thought that it could be anything and didn't mind it till it thunked again. I went to the balcony to go see what I was hearing, and then it clicked. I was face to face with an intruder. I started screaming for help, and my family came down to check out the commotion. Thank God I checked the balcony that day. Who knows what else could have happened? Now today, July 9th, I haven't got a wink of sleep thinking of the terror that I faced. Am I one of the targets of a home invasion? How did they get my name? And what do they want from me? I was at the gas station and went to the register to buy gas and some drinks as I was going on a small road trip. I got there and there was a large balding man with ginger beard with the name tag, Guy. I smiled at him and was polite since I work customer service and try to be nice to everyone because you'll never know what the kind of day the said person may be having. Guy smiled at me and asked if we'd met before. I've never seen him in my life, and I made a joke saying, "I just have one of those faces, I guess," and laughed it off. I had alarm bells ringing in my head because of his tone. I had a deep sinking feeling in my gut as he took his time checking me out. Guy kept talking to me, saying that I looked great today, and he guessed my dead name. My dead name, but I haven't told anyone my dead name in years as I'm non-binary and hate people knowing that. I try my best and keep my dead name a secret, plus I was paying with cash, so I couldn't think of a way that he would know this. I smiled more to brush it off, trying to imply that wasn't actually my name, saying, "No, I go by Royal." He frowned and scratched his head, and I could have swore that I saw bloody dandruff or something like that come down onto the counter. I tooled my change and went out to my car, filling it up as quickly as I could. I pulled out my phone with the intent to let others know my location and just tell my friends my mom. Feeling hot breath on my neck and someone's body pressed against my back, I spun around, and there he was, Guy. The most ungodly smell hit my nose as he looked down at me. I'm 5'6", and my best guess was he was at least 6 foot. Guy smiled. Multiple of his teeth had been missing. He said I was rude for talking about him behind his back. I laughed it off and apologized. I went to quickly get the gas pump out of the car. Before I even could get my hand on it, Guy grabbed it from me and did it for me, smirking and saying that I shouldn't bother doing such manly things. He went to explain that he finally knew where he knew me from. He explained that I was a slave in a past life, and that he was my master, and he knew my frame anywhere. I'm 17 and I've never met this man in my life. I nodded and tried to laugh it off, saying, "Oh, really?" I didn't want to anger him. The man didn't seem to be happy with that as I tried to go around to get into my car. He opened the passenger door to get it, and I was in full panic mode and had started my car and just put the pedal to the metal with both doors swinging open. As I drove away, Guy had fallen to the ground and started to scream and curse. I eventually pulled over after a mile and just shut both of them, crying to myself silently. This happened about a year ago, and I still have yet to return to the store without my husband. So last July, I took my then 4- and 6-year-old sons to Target to back-to-school shop. Since having kids and hearing all these horror stories, I am very observant of my surroundings when out. Anyways, while at Target, like most women, I looked through all the sections. While in the women's clothing, I noticed 2 older men close by that kept looking our way. I thought maybe I'm just being paranoid, so I kept going about my business, but keeping my boys super close. We go to the baby section, they pop up. Toys, makeup, and same thing. I was really feeling uneasy because they seemed to be everywhere we were, and they never had a cart. One guy was holding one little thing. I go check out and wait for a big group of nurses leaving Starbucks to walk out. I threw the boys in the car without buckling them and locked the doors. As soon as I look up, the 2 guys walk out empty-handed, looking around. I didn't think they saw me, so I started to leave when I looked in my rearview mirror and saw them behind me, now in a truck. I stopped right there and turned around and took a photo so they could see me. They turn like they're going back to the store, and I park over a couple of stores down where they can't see me, and I call the cops. While I'm on the phone with them in a sort of full-blown panic at this point, I watch one of the guys change his shirt and then go back inside. I waited until the police got there so I could make sure that they got and had the right guys. I don't know what their plan was that day, But my mama gut told me that it wasn't anything good. I'm so thankful that my babies and I are okay. So I'm a 22-year-old female. For context that's important to my story, I have a pretty larger than average chest area. Now, I take the bus home every day from college. It's a route that's mostly comprised of college students either going to class or back home. One evening I stayed later, so I was on the bus when it was starting to get dark. The main rush times for students to be leaving was long past, so I was in a predominantly empty bus. One person who was on the bus already as I boarded was a woman. She was probably about 50 or so and looked at me with a smile as I got on. I'm a little shy, so I half smiled back and went to sit further at the back. The lady got up and placed herself in the seat in front of mine and immediately said, "I just had to say, I love your outfit." I was surprised, but she seemed harmless enough, so I just smiled and thanked her. "I guess it takes a certain body type for that kind of dress." She pressed on, basically gesturing to my chest. "Do you mind if I ask what size?" she said, and from there on was just making really odd comments about my body, asking what it was like, how I must get so much attention from older men, and if I liked it. She was using her phone a lot as we spoke. She was really starting to make me uncomfortable, so I decided I'd just get off at the next stop and get a cab. But at the next stop, a guy got on, and he instantly made eye contact with the lady. He looked gnarly, to be honest, older than her and in dirty clothes with a phone in hand. He sat in a seat further from us, but he kept glancing over, looking at me really intently. The woman was looking at him in a way that made me feel certain that they knew each other, and it got way too weird for me, so I waited for a few minutes until the bus stopped in a crowded area in the center of town and just got off. The two looked at me but didn't follow, and once it was out of sight, I just ran for it. I don't know for sure what the hell was going on, but it seemed a lot like these two knew each other and something creepy was going on. I'm just glad I acted on instinct and left before something happened. I'm going to tell this story just to make people aware of the dangers they may be putting themselves in by selling items online. I get a message from someone telling me that they want to buy a specific item, and from the get-go, the person was pretty pushy. I wanted to make some money, so I responded. The whole time that I was talking to this person, something felt really off. This person, we'll just call A, was being a little bit weird from the first message. A kept changing the time that they were coming to get the item. A asked me if I had change for a certain amount, and I said no. This was before A got to my house to pick up the item. I told A that they needed to get change because I didn't have any cash. A ends up showing up and had parked around the corner somewhere so I couldn't see the car. I felt something was off because A handed me the incorrect amount and asked if I had change. I had already told A that I didn't. Then A proceeded to ask me to get in their car so we can go get change. I told A that I don't get in the car with strangers. A was like, "Oh, I'm from Europe, and we don't worry about getting in strangers' cars." I'm thinking, yeah, okay. But I'm definitely not going. A also asked me a lot of unnecessary questions about the watch. It was brand new, and I had already told A this, plus it was just an ordinary wind-up watch to set the time. A went and got change, surprise, surprise. So when this person got back, I could see the car and a few other people were in the car. I had a really bad feeling, so I just grabbed the money, gave A the watch, and ran back inside. Am I making a big deal over this? If you need more details, I will provide them, but thanks for listening. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and there are super fun live streams every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night. I'd love to see you there. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, or over email, and you might even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, Mama Gut.